Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best practices and best ideas of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today's podcast is titled Family Offices Now and Post-COVID-19. It features Francois, Renet, who's a family office thought leader and podcaster. And for those of you watching on video, you can see that he has a very cool studio setup. Francois, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Angelo, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast this morning.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. And I would like to give people a little bit of context with Francois. As I noted, he's a family office thought leader, has many touch points with single family offices globally, and is also, again, a podcaster and someone experienced in interviews. And we're going to do this a little differently in that I, for sure, have questions from structural to big picture to investing of Francois, and he's going to have some questions for me. So we're going to reverse the tables a little bit, partially about midway or so through the interview, where I'm going to have to work a little bit and answer some questions. That's not always easy to get out of me, Francois. We will see. But to give a little deeper context regarding Francois, he has incredibly strong communication and people skills and a concentration significantly on investor relations, marketing, branding, and business development. Francois has been successful in establishing meaningful and long-lasting business relationships with high and ultra-high net worth individuals, single-family offices, Fortune 500 corporations for over 2 decades. Well-versed in emerging technologies, which are now, during COVID times, more important than ever, Francois' expertise in this area has been central to all his endeavors and is a critical part of his skill set. His tech-savvy approach to business has allowed him to continuously hone his core skills and sharpen his focus on the use of AI, augmented and virtual reality, social media, SaaS platforms for development in the areas of risk management, client experience, and operations. Francois, that is quite the encompassing background.
It's actually a little more than 2 decades. We're getting close to 3 decades. But I'm actually very thankful to be part of this generation that saw a real, the birth of computing to a larger number of people, the evolution, the innovation, and having the ability to actually understand how technology works from the core all the way to the newest innovations really allows to put all the parts together, as I mentioned, from risk management, operations, client relations, to create a seamless experience that is really dedicated to my clients.
And given your global connectivity, both here in the US and around the world, and given that no one really saw COVID coming, and it hit us harder, at least here in the States, than I think what the perception was as we saw it coming a little bit in January and parts of February. So family offices got turned upside down, so to speak. What are they talking about in a very broad question? What are you hearing from the families or the family office executives during today's times about their business? And let's make no mistake about it, the single family office is a business for the family. They may not always treat it as one. We'll save that for maybe some of my comments, we'll see. But it is a business.
It is. So people are going to see me blink a lot. It's because I literally work probably about 18 hours a day. I start with calls at 5 o'clock in the morning around the world. That goes all the way through to 10 p.m. And that's how big this has become. This is not just something that affects the US, it's global. You're absolutely right, Angelo. What we've seen is different things. Some families have been more affected than others, depending on where their investments were or where their businesses were. Because it's not just COVID, right? We also had the oil crisis, and that affected a lot of families.
Social unrest. Yeah, a whole bunch of things have happened.
Absolutely. And so the one trait that I've seen that I'm finding fascinating is a lot of family offices seeing this time as a time of reflection, somewhere where nature said, enough is enough. It's time to reboot, if you will. And what that turns into is, well, what does it mean to leave a legacy today? Does it go beyond leaving wealth? And if that's okay with you, I'd love to read a paragraph from one of the family offices I'm working with a lot, based out of Texas. And here's how it goes. Let us choose this to be an opportunity to wipe out past bad behaviors, preserve what has been beneficial, and start with a clean whiteboard. Our future generations will look back on 2020 as the year our generation laid the new foundation for a single family office's future. History has offered us few opportunities to redefine the world and humanity. 2020 is such a memorable moment in time. Now what? Now that we have a blank canvas, where do we start to make changes? Our wealth, expert knowledge, our long-term focus? As a family office, we are defined by our absolute discretion, the numerous emotions we have to consider, in addition to the care we exercise in determining whom we allow into our inner circle. We are also acutely aware of the value of time and the limited amount of time of it to advance our family's legacy plan. Very powerful words that encompasses absolutely everything that surrounds a family in general, but a wealthy single family office specifically. And what we have seen is, and I think you and I had a conversation a little while back about how how COVID was going to affect the world. Was it going to make us better people? I think at that point we were stuck at home. We were ready to come out and hug absolutely anything, a lamppost, a car, anything for some human contact. And that's what we're seeing. So what I'm seeing with family offices, the conversation I have with them goes beyond just this world. We've actually started talking about their businesses, because you're mentioning some of them take it more seriously than others. I'm actually having real conversations, more authentic conversations than ever for a start, but also about their businesses. And now we're starting to find correlations. Oh, so you do this. Hang on, I'm talking to another family office in Dubai or in Morocco or in France, Germany. Why don't we put you in touch and see what we can do together? So there's a real collaboration and a broadening of that network that I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, I completely concur from everything that I see as well. And that statement that you read from the single family office in Texas, spot on, that some of that's going to correlate perhaps to my responses to questions that you'll have for me as well, as I noted earlier, that we'll get into, but that was great. So when I think of you, Francois, given your global connectivity, I also think of someone who helps to connect the dots and brings families together. We all know how interested families are in direct investing and broadly investing. And in today's COVID world, with distressed opportunity, with challenges in real estate and private companies, but with challenges creates opportunities for families with the cash, with time, and to some degree with the guts and or experience to be willing to withstand the challenging times. So how are you helping to put families together, not even just on the investing side, maybe in sharing during COVID times on their family legacy and other aspects of family offices?
Sure. So in many different ways. I'm also employed by a private equity firm here in Southern California that focuses, it's a multifamily office that focuses on real estate. So very good point. What have we seen? We've seen higher risk, you're correct, and a shift towards alternative investments. The market has been incredibly volatile. We've hit the biggest lows, we've hit the biggest highs, and that's on a weekly basis. We're not talking over a period of 3 months. So we're seeing a lot of visibility on impact investing. That is huge. And impact investing comes in different forms. It comes from working with sponsors, developers, who put a focus on renewable energy, on renewable materials, who actually take into consideration wellness. What I mean by wellness is we were all very surprised by this virus. And what we learned is the environment we live in is very important. So what I'm working a lot on is one company specifically that is going to revolutionize health and wellness, because it takes it from the source, how to grow the food with high nutrients, to take it to a table, to DNA analysis. you name it, they do everything from A to Z. And it's fascinating because it also includes the air we breathe, the water we drink. Everything is going to change from that perspective. And that is very true both in residential, but also in the business world with offices, for example. You and I were talking earlier about how the COVID and the fact that people were working from home was going to affect the office investment space, right? And we're seeing two different things. We're seeing that, yes, and you are correct, a lot of people have gotten used to working from home. We've also seen that a lot of employers who thought, well, it's not going to work, were forced into it. And some of them are seeing, well, you know what, it actually works pretty well. I can have smaller spaces, pay less insurance. There's a lot of advantages to having people working from home. All the way down to Facebook, for example, that is saying that in the next decade, more than 90% of their workforce will be working from home. That's a huge statement. Let's think about what that means on a micro level. San Francisco. The market in San Francisco and Silicon Valley has been the most incredible market we've seen in the United States. I mean, people making $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year, still not being able to afford more than a studio or having to share a house, you know? And so now you have all this market. If you can work from home, why would you stay in Silicon Valley? Why would you stay in San Francisco? You're going to move further outside where you're going to get more home for your money, right? That has other consequences as well. It means for a residential, we're going to start looking at developments and how do we create a real home office. I mean, we've all seen the memes and the videos on LinkedIn of people, you know, fake duct taping their kids to the floor because they're running through the living room as you're trying to have a Zoom conference call, for example, right? And they're very amusing, but they're a reality. I've been caught with that a couple of times myself, and it's a little embarrassing, but it is what it is. We had to adapt the way we could. So actually for the developers to take that into consideration, say, okay, let's dedicate part of a home to creating an office. That means you need more space. What have we also seen through the COVID? We've seen, I wouldn't call it an exodus, but certainly a very large thought where people are thinking, maybe I don't want to live in the city anymore, where people are on top of me, where dissemination of a virus is a lot faster and the percentage probably a lot higher of catching it. So what are we seeing? A move towards secondary markets. And that's becoming very clear. I was reading two articles yesterday, one in the New York Times, one in the Wall Street Journal, that actually mentioned the word exodus. So we're seeing all these things, and I'm seeing this reflected in how family offices invest, the ones I'm talking to. Multifamily is very big. Multifamily was incredibly resilient in 2008, 2009. Because, as we said earlier, millennials don't want to be tied down. It's an opportunity to be able to move fairly easily. The other side of multifamily is, unfortunately, some people are going to lose their homes, as they did in 2008. They still need a roof over their head. What did we see in that period? People moving towards multifamily. So multifamily has probably been the most resilient asset in real estate. And that's something that our company here, Paradigm, is very dedicated to. But as I mentioned, also with a very big aspect of impact in terms of the material use, renewable energy, quality of the air, amenities. Those are very, very important factors that we see with family offices.
Yeah, that's certainly very true. I completely concur, and I've written and spoken about the new dynamic given COVID-19. And I know there's many grave challenges from a human social interaction and our own health and safety. But if you look at it from advancing technology, what was going to happen is now happening quicker. There's going to be amazing entrepreneurs that are going to advance AI, VR, augmented reality. I'm pretty connected in Silicon Valley. It's happening right now. It's accelerating. But the big point that you make is 100% correct. The employer in white collar industries is realizing that the remote work, depending if you have the right workers, and I know about leadership, coaching, managing, all that's going to be incredibly important. It could be an incredible money saver relative to real estate, and really, and forget the giant companies like Facebook, but the more intimate companies, it creates a global workforce for them because people don't have to be tied down to a specific office in an incredibly expensive locale like a San Francisco, or a little bit lesser degree, but not that lesser, a New York. Now, that works both ways. That may say, well, that opens up the world to employers, but for people with talent and skill and dedication to a task, it creates freedom for them. It creates the opportunity where if I want to move with my family to Lake Tahoe, if I want to move to Idaho, I could do that, and I could still do what I do. I'm able to do it more cost effectively. I'm going to be happier. I'm going to have greater family engagement. Now, the one area that I think will be negatively impacted by that is I do think what's known as the water cooler effect, in terms of how we share and collaborate and how we bounce our ideas off one another are going to be more challenged in today's world. But if I had to list 10 things, I think there's more positive benefits than there are negatives, but we'll eventually need to address that issue. We're going to have one entrepreneur on next week. How could I kind of say what they're doing? We have their VC backer who's going to be on. They created a technology where you could feel the aspect of something that is away from you. It creates a certain sound wave that you could virtually shake someone's hand. You could feel their face. It's a little weird. This entrepreneur is brilliant. And by the way, I believe that's Tuesday for those that are listening in live. And the VC backer is M13. They're a really intriguing firm. So stay tuned. We're excited about that. But yeah, I love what you said. So far, we're agreeing too much. Hopefully, we'll find some things to disagree with. But I know you might have had a question or two for me. I'm shaking in terms of if I'm going to be able to answer them, but why don't you go for it?
It took me a while, so I had to write them down. And this is based on the conversation we've had. I don't know if they're difficult, but they're certainly thought-provoking. Wealthy families today face increasing complexity in a current and eventually post-COVID world. That's difficulty number one. When is that post-COVID world going to be, right? And how are single-family offices impacted?
Okay. Now more than ever, single-family offices need to create an adaptive, resilient, and a word that I use a lot, yes, I took from Nassim Taleb, antifragile family office that thrives generationally. And this has given rise to the modern single-family office, which does more with less, is going to use amplified technology and more strategic outsourcing. I'll give a little anecdote, if that's the correct word. The world that we're living in now, COVID-19, and family offices have to realize this, and many of them don't. It's not playing regular chess where the board is in front of us. You see what's on the board. I see what's on the board. We have pre-planned moves. It's equal information. That's really not how life is. And that's not how things are now during COVID-19. There's a form of chess for the chess players out there created by the legendary Bobby Fischer called, it goes by several names, but some people simply call it Fischer chess. What's the difference? The back line with the power pieces is a randomly shuffled format. So it's not like the rooks are at the end. It's randomly shuffled, so you can't have, to a degree, any pre-planned moves. But I actually think a game that is really like life and great for investors and for family offices is poker. Because poker does involve some randomness and luck, yet also skill, emotional intelligence. And you have to make decisions without having the complete information. And it's somewhat unfair. Even in Fischer chess, both parties could see exactly what the other party has, but that's not how real life works. And that's not how things are shaping up during COVID-19. So those are some examples relative to your question that I like to give. You know, most families are going to say, Francois, that they want to preserve their wealth and resources, sustain their legacy. Being a little funny, I'll put it a different way. They basically want to stay rich. So COVID-19 comes along, the markets very quickly got displaced by what, 30, 40%. That's really scary. Now they bounced back amazingly, and I don't quite know how, partially due to the stimulus. But staying rich, I will add, is really more than just financial. As Jay Hughes writes and talks about, it's spiritual, it's social, it's intellectual, and human. So there really is, Jay's correct. There's 5 forms of quote unquote human capital. The single family office must coordinate in today's world internal and external resources to mitigate risk, investment risk, operational, geopolitical, tax, government confiscation, divorce, lawsuit, intrafamily. Effectively, there's a gazillion black swans that could happen. So you want your single family office to solve problems before they exist. Now that sounds great in theory. In reality, of course, it's very hard. It's going to come down to people, which is maybe a subject that we'll get to shortly. Maybe I'll put it a little bit of a different way as well. You want your single family office to procure positive future outcomes.
Yes. So going back to your examples, which I really like, chess, right? I think what's changed is where before perhaps the game was slanted with one side having better visibility on what the other side had. This has been changed by COVID. No one has visibility on each other's board. And it's because this virus has affected everybody indiscriminately across the board, right? No pun intended. Poker. We all played a hand, lost that hand, played another, made that money back. And so now we're back to where we were and we're thinking, what do I do? Do I take another risk or do I change the way I play to have a different outcome, right? And that's when we talk about different kinds of investing. What I'd like to put in here that I have found absolutely fascinating and that I think the world at large doesn't understand is just how philanthropic single families are. Why? Because as the text I wrote earlier, we are incredibly discreet. And so donations are also very anonymous. And I have been flabbergasted to see how family offices have come together during this time to increase that philanthropy. Despite the fact that they were being affected, they still took time and real thought, not just giving away because it's a tax break or anything like that, but truly being thoughtful about what they wanted. They're looking at philanthropy the same way they look at investment. Where is my money going to make the biggest impact? Is that something that you have seen as well?
For sure. And it makes me a little bit excitable in my voice because some of the media interviews that I've done are almost looking to, I got you, to the successful family, as if they should be ashamed that they're successful. God forbid I become an entrepreneur and create a successful company that does very well. I employ a truckload of people. I help to support communities. I pay taxes. Now, sure, am I going to look at the current tax code and look to pay relatively as little taxes as I could? But if I'm doing tremendously well, I'm still paying more, in my opinion, than my fair share. There's an underlying current going on that it's almost shameful to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, to strive, to be hungry. And yet, of course not all, there's bad apples in all groups. Yet still, even though the public sentiment shockingly appears to be against them, for sure, I've noticed an uptick in concern about humanity, about the social issues and the unrest that we're seeing now, even among people that you may not expect that from, are like, you know, maybe I'm wrong about some of my assumptions that I made. And they're looking to make an impact. Their money could help to make an impact, so that's a part of it. Their influence in the community, and they're sharing with other families and people about how they could help through this global crisis. We're all part of humanity. You know, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. And when we pass away, we all return back to the earth, right? So having a world that we live in where a person's wealth and success could potentially be impactful from their knowledge, their wealth and resources. What did I say earlier about the 5 forms of capital? The less people have capital, the more they focus on the financial, the financial, the financial. We all know the story. I could strip a billionaire of all their money, the vast majority of them within 2 or 3 years. Even if they're not a billionaire again, they're going to be wealthy and successful. Their knowledge, their confidence, their Rolodex, their creativity, their discipline. There's a variety of factors that go into that. So I completely agree, which is why I'm more choosy in the media interviews that I do now, in terms of just the general sentiment from a lot of people in the media appears to be very negative towards people that are successful. I don't get it, but maybe that's just me.
No, you're absolutely correct. And this is something that in my podcast, I've brought back forth and time after time after time, kind of breaking this image, because it also goes to other subjects that I'd rather not touch because they treat with social unrest. And we know how delicate these subjects are right now and how easy they are to interpretation, right? But let's look at 2020. We all knew that 2020 was going to be a year of change. What I'm seeing is that areas of grays are disappearing. And what we're seeing emerge more and more is black and white, right? And for those, I mean, good and bad. You were talking about good apples, bad apples, and that's what we're seeing, quite literally, good and bad in many ways. And the way it works is actually fascinating, because those single family offices that have hired great people to manage their investments, to be the stewards, the leaders of their single family office, what I'm seeing is philanthropy is coming at a crossroad with investment. Philanthropy in the form of investing into technology, for example, seeing the long game and saying, oh, I could just give money to Africa, for example, right? Because that's an example that's been used for the last 30 or 40 years. But now what we're seeing is, what technology can I invest in that would actually have long-term ripple effects across the continent that will literally teach people how to fish versus giving them the fish? Is that something that you're seeing as well?
For sure. And I'm going to correlate it a little bit of a different way. So I realized the question you asked me before that I answered a little lofty relative to you got to adapt, be resilient, and create an anti-fragile family office. That probably begs the question, okay, you gave an intellectual type answer with maybe hopefully an interesting anecdote on Fisher chess and poker, but kind of how do you go about and do that? And some of that relates to the question that you just kind of asked me now. So there's 3 stakeholders involved. There's the elders, there's the rising generation, and there's the single family office executives. Why don't I lump into them strategic key outside advisors as well? So really there's 3 audiences that to some degree care about themselves. And how do you get them to be team players? What Adam Grant, the great professor and author of Give and Take, talks about, how do you get them to give and not take as much? So to me, that comes down to defining values, clarifying mission, vision. So those are important things for families to do, both the elders and the rising generation, for the rising generation to be respectful and understand that the elders have the experience, they've been through hard times, they know how to have a cool and steady hand. On the other hand, the elders need to be more open-minded to people that may have a different perspective. So both of those constituencies, as well as the single family offices, they should develop their own values, mission, and vision. Vision is a deep picture of aspirationally where we look to be. Oh, we could talk about setting goals, but my issue with setting goals in family offices that I've spoken about so much is it's at the whims of the family. They change so much depending on circumstances, their mood, a variety of factors. So the family office, the modern family office, although, yeah, they want to have the mission and goals, but that could adapt and that could change, my God, sometimes almost daily, if they're more of a service-centric family office that is dealing with a lot of requests from the family. So what does this come down to? It comes down to most family offices will not have a succession. The elders to the rising generation won't be as successful as they want. And most SFOs know that they won't last into the transition, if there's any transition. The transition is they're gone into the next generation. So you look at the development of character, of resilience and grit. And I actually do have something that happens to be on my desk for something I'm working on. It's by Matt Wesley, who's one of the brilliant thought leaders in the community, especially on culture. So he talks about the value of a chief learning officer, either inside the family or potentially as an external resource. So I'm going to read a little bit of it because I think it's important. The chief learning officer is a position within the family office charged with fostering the development of both its capacity and capabilities of the family to sustain personal, cultural, and financial well-being for generations. Capacity, that's building. It revolves around the underlying ability of the family to adapt to changing and challenging circumstances. And he wrote this well before COVID-19. Capability development has to do with gaining the skills associated with the management of personal finances, trust structures, governance, business, and philanthropy that you mentioned earlier, Francois. So as I noted, COVID-19 is accelerating everything that was going to happen, technologies, remote working, and reminds us what single-family offices should have been doing all along. And what is that, Francois? That is stress testing, that is adapting, becoming more digital, and henceforth, all of that combining to becoming more anti-fragile. So this really comes down, again, I'm going to put it in a little different perspective as I kind of conclude my commentary. And my members have heard me write or talk about this in the last couple of months, but it plays into it. There's 4 key areas that are going to determine the success in the family office being resilient and being anti-fragile. By far, number 1 is the people. It's the people of their values, their mission, their vision, their leadership and culture. You are what you do. That's your culture, not what you say, because of course what you're going to say is going to sound great, but what are you actually doing? So it's really important that you get the right people on the bus, that they're properly managed and coached, that they're givers, not takers, and that they're open-minded, they're a learning mindset. They're not locked in and stuck in ways like traditional chess when we're in a Fisher chess type of world. Second, I would put ideas. Ideas are simply a part of people. I could elaborate on that more, but we're going to be a little tight for time. So people, ideas, machines, or technologies. You need to work remotely. How do you have communication? Are you using Slack? How do you do project management? What aggregation and reporting software are you using? How are you adapting to big data and AI? There's so many different factors there. And the last one is systems, which effectively are processes. In a family office, that could boil down to policy and procedures. An example, we're working remotely. One person handles the wires. What happens if that person gets COVID-19 and goes down? Do we have a cloud-based platform as well as training where someone could step up, look at the policy and the procedures that we follow, and could execute upon something that is more of a task like that? It gets more difficult in aspects that require a level of creativity and a deeper skill set, but you could still map out. If you make it easier for people to be successful by having the right policy and procedures, which wraps into systems, it makes it easier for people to focus on being more productive with their time. And again, this comes back to the number 1 thing, which is people. We all have blind spots. The opportunity of having an outside set of eyes. Family offices are too siloed to begin with. They develop a lot of blind spots. Some of them are not doing so well during COVID-19. So I went off a little bit on a tangent there, but it happens to be an important area for me and relates to a masterclass, which is a PowerPoint that I talk through likely over multiple days. So we'll probably do it in, 2 half-day programs that shortly this summer. For sure, it's going to be this summer. I probably want to do it with the relaunch of my new website, which will hopefully happen in the next week or 2. So right now we're early mid-August. So hopefully at the latest by August 1st, not only will we have a beautiful brand new website, but I'm going to be launching my masterclass series for my members, which is, I think, the most comprehensive masterclass and training on becoming resilient and anti-fragile of anything that I've seen. And I see everything globally. So I'm really, really excited about that. And again, pardon me, now I know what it's like to ask questions and have the people answering the questions go on too long.
Actually, I'm very upset with you, not for that reason. You answered the question I was going to ask you about how single family offices could adapt to this new situation. And you've absolutely nailed it. Bottom line is, yes, there are 4 areas. The most important and critical is people, without a doubt. Coming from perspective of being an advisory to single family offices, like you, I've surrounded myself with wonderful people like yourself, thought leaders, but also a lot of coaches. Out of what you were saying, one of the most critical is communication, and intergenerational communication and intercultural communication, because those are moving. And very often, if you have somebody, a coach in the middle, that can take all generations and unite them around the legacy of the single family office, it makes a difference right away. And then, of course, you have all your technical people, as you mentioned, systems, critical, processes, critical. This virus should have taught us we have to have fail-safe for absolutely every single situation possible, because we don't know who's going to be affected tomorrow. That's absolutely critical. And that is everything I've seen. But again, going back to what you're saying before, the silo, this is the biggest difference I've seen in the work I've done with single family offices, is the ability to find common grounds that they don't necessarily see. We all have blinders, right? If we're in the same industry all our lives, you see it. I made a very funny, what I think was a very funny comment. I'm sorry, I'm going like this, really, I really shouldn't. But using the example of, the big companies, a big corporation in the US, where you spend all your life in toothpaste and toothbrushes. If you're lucky, you might get promoted to shaving foam and razors. But you develop these blinders because you're focused on one area of business. What I'm seeing when I talk to different family offices is I show them correlation. Right now, I'm building a whole ecosystem, a platform that involves health and wellness, technology, how to manage your home, your yachts, your jets, retail, luxury marketplace, philanthropy, everything under literally one roof. And how did we build this? By working with multiple single family offices, leveraging the strengths of their families and the generation in their families to build this platform and seeing everything come together. The most beautiful part of that was actually seeing how excited the family offices were getting and how generations came together around something that was bigger than them. And that was absolutely fabulous, Angela.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, yes, we're seeing that kind of more collaboration than I would say I've seen before or pre-COVID-19. Now, again, there are, besides the obvious social isolation and health challenges of COVID, it has been more challenging to have the water cooler effect and to share ideas. That has been more challenging, and cybersecurity has been an additional concern as well. That's a whole other subject that we're going to be covering very detailed in the coming weeks. But if you're going to have a more remote workforce, you really have to think of things like they probably need to have their own computer that we as the family office buy for them, and they cannot use that for personal use. That laptop or possibly even a specific mobile device needs to be exclusive to that family business purpose in their family office. It probably needs a separate Wi-Fi password inside their system that they use inside their home. The family office insourced or outsourced IT probably needs to set up a little bit more significant firewall. There needs to be protocols on opening up emails from people you don't know, because there's lots of things that could go wrong there, from phishing techniques to ransomware. So unfortunately, there's negative as well, with a lot of people that are not maybe as digitally fluid and understanding of the risk that could happen. And that's where family office is. That relates somewhat to technology and systems and policy and procedures and training. I mean, these are all things, again, all things that were going to happen that are just happening right now, as opposed to, I'm going to put it off for 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely. And then another big change that we've seen that was coming back accelerated was blockchain and cryptocurrency. For the longest time, everybody put the two technologies together as though they were twins and conjoined twins, which they're not. So what I'm seeing more and more is the use of blockchain to address exactly what you've been talking about, which is all the cybersecurity risks. And I'm currently working with a company, for example, that will create a digital ID that is a single number. For all intents and purposes, you're tokenizing human beings. And that way you can actually communicate across technology without ever having the name, the social security number, or anything like that. Everything resides on a server that cannot be accessed. And then we're working at the same time with the technology that's a hardware that will allow you to tap against a mobile device to verify and authenticate who you are. And then when a message comes to you, you know it's been authenticated. So we've been putting a tremendous amount of time and resources on building that technology, because you're right, cybersecurity. We have a colleague here, and it's a funny story, but it really shouldn't be. She gets a text message from what she thinks is the president of the company saying, hey, I'm in a meeting, I need you to go and buy me gift cards. And the tone is so good that it actually makes her believe that it really is the president of the company. So we're not talking somebody doing it randomly. That's somebody who's been studying the way we communicate, right? And so she goes out, she buys $900 worth of gift cards, scratches them, gives them numbers, gets to the office and says, oh, did you get the cards? What cards are you talking about? Why? Because she was using her laptop and she hadn't protected it, even though we have that policy. She had just started with us. So now that's done. But that's how easy things can happen. And it happens all the time. We've gone from getting that message from the king of Sierra Leone, who is, in exchange for a bank account number, is going to put $5 million into it, to something that's a lot more refined, and where artificial intelligence is being used to learn about how people communicate to be able to replicate that. And that's actually quite frightening.
Yeah, the bad guys are really, really smart, and they're global. And this is what they do, unfortunately. There are some of the steps that I just noted that are relatively basic if they're implemented religiously. And they're not complicated. They're relatively basic. We didn't even get into VPNs in a home and stuff like that, and a little bit more some complex areas. It will probably get rid of 90% of what I just mentioned of what could go wrong. And then, like you said, a lot of the bad guys, they track the context of how you communicate, and then having protocols on how wires or ACHs are handled, and dual authentication and checking all that. I mean, there's a variety of factors here. There's a family office digital technology platform. It's the only one I know that's based on a blockchain platform. Now, that's important for one, security purposes that you noted. But for those that are listening in, I mean, you for sure know that you really don't own the data on the services that you use. That's why you get privacy statements and stuff like that, because they may not use your name, but the raw data that they're gathering, they package up and sell out. I'm not going to mention any names, but basically it's everyone. But this company, you own the data. So not only is it blockchain secure, you actually own the data, and it contextualizes the interaction from bill paying to accounting issues. Now, you still may need services that do that. So it's not all inclusive to everything. It's not there yet. Maybe in 5 years, they will have that. So again, the COVID world is forcing all of us, including me, you need to be digitally savvy in today's world. And although I think plenty about the value of experience and a cool, calming hand, I could argue that's one of the advantages of the younger audience is they're just more comfortable. It's more natural for them to be digitally savvy. You said you want to have a cross-cultural approach to families. And I completely agree. You can't have everyone that is a white male, 65 years old, and went to an Ivy League school. You're going to have groupthink. You're going to have anchoring. You want to have a cross-pollination of different cultures and opinions, and you don't want to get anchored in an idea. The best idea doesn't always come from you, even if you're the head of the family or the head of the single family office. Oh, these are issues, Francois, that we could go on for hours and hours. And part of these in a more structured format, I'm covering in that before mentioned masterclass, which is almost ready. I've been saying that for about a month, but this time I mean it. It's 98% done. Again, once that website rolls out within a week or so, we'll be making some major announcements about that. And maybe concluding, Francois, how has COVID-19 to you and or what you hear from the stories from your families, how has it positively impacted? You mentioned philanthropy and giving back to the community and the world. That's one. Are there other positive advancements in either the family, the enterprise, or the family office that you're seeing that we're being pushed along with now to how we need to work during COVID-19 times?
Yes, more authentic relationships, a bigger desire to communicate intergenerationally and interculturally, the desire to make a true impact, as I mentioned, through philanthropy, but also through technology, very much so. And we could go, everything you've said is absolutely correct, from the data, etc. If you don't mind, I'd like to put one cautionary tale: social media. Social media and media have been, in many ways, the biggest issue with COVID, with the reporting, etc. And going back to what we were talking about, cybersecurity, and this is where the younger generation are so comfortable communicating via social media. Remember that social media is also your biggest enemy, because when we talk about artificial intelligence, extracting sentiment, who you are, that's where the biggest source comes from. It's not from your own servers, it's not from your own networks, it's from social media. And so that's something to be very, very careful with. And I'm always very cautionary with family offices. That is by far your biggest weakness.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. We didn't even get into that relative to weaknesses or cybersecurity issues and the advent, especially of younger people utilizing social media. And, I'm using it more than ever because it's been a platform for me relative to dissemination of what I'm doing on YouTube and my podcasting. And it's been great. But if I'm a family office, I'm going to have a different perspective in terms of I'm probably going to want to have a social media policy, by the way. So again, policy and procedures relative to my people that are in my family office. Shockingly, there's a tremendous amount of family office people on LinkedIn. Now, that's great for me in terms of marketing and knowing who they are. And luckily, I hope, a good guy with great content and thought leadership to provide to them. But I can make the argument that, again, there's lots of bad people out there, and it just identifies them. Oh, an executive in a single family office means that they represent a very, very, very wealthy family. And that potentially makes them a target because they're probably not overly digitally savvy. I hope they are. I hope they're getting better than what they were, but that may be a little optimistic thinking. Francois, we covered a lot of ground in relatively a short amount of time. I for sure look forward to the next time, and we'll both have more stories and more, whether depending on the time frame we do it, during or post COVID-19. But yeah, this is a new normal, and it's not going to go back exactly to how it was before, partially due to some things are working, AKA relatively well, during this more remote time. For those families and people that would like to learn more about you and what you do, your relationship with the multifamily office private equity firm, how could they learn more and reach out to you?
Either via email or via my phone number. If you could put that maybe in the comments. I'm also on LinkedIn under Francois Renet. I just put it in the comments. I'm completely open. I love collaborating. I find that the more I've collaborated, the more impact we've made. So feel free to reach out. And if you're working on any kind of technologies, ideas, come to us. We're happy to be the kind of repository that can then find family offices or businesses to put it all together and to advance the world in this new normal.
And your last name is spelled R-E-N-E-T. And is there an email that you wanted to give that people could reach you?
The easiest is, let's make it super simple. My first name, Francois, my last name, Renet, @gmail.com. There we go.
That is very simple.
It is.
Well, everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, iHeart, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and other platforms. My YouTube channel, where a fair number of these video interviews go, is simply Family Office. So look me up, subscribe on YouTube at Family Office. I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to families of great success and their single family offices, doing a significant amount of original proprietary content, hosting global programming on hold because of COVID, but doing multiple times per week, so hundreds of times a year, digital programming. So we've been incredibly active. Sometimes it makes its way onto the YouTube or podcast, but actually less so than I originally planned. So you really need to be a member. You need to be actively involved. And there is a timeliness to the information that you're often receiving, that being live and being active in it and being a participant and potentially asking questions is really, really important. And as I noted, we're going to be rolling out really a significant masterclass and a whole series about creating a resilient, anti-fragile single-family office. It kind of is my culmination of work over 13 years of doing this, so much more so than my book. And even my podcasting. So I'm really, really excited about it, as you could tell. And if you're hearing this on a podcast, probably you'll be out by then, because it's about a 30-day lag from doing these live and posting it on my podcasting platform. I could be reached at familyofficeassociation.com or email angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Thank you all so much. Francois, thank you for being a great guest today. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, and look forward to your masterclass.
Thank you so much.